We are hoping to speak to the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. I'll be honest with you, we don't quite have her yet, but we will bring her to you just as soon as we can to try and find out exactly what Labour's position is. Rishi Sunak was touching on that slightly in the interview. I believe we may have Rachel Reeves. Thank you very much for being with us. We just heard from Rishi Sunak, who was saying, I hope you can hear me, Rachel Reeves.
Hello there.
There you are. Excellent. Good news. So we just heard from Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, effectively saying that things are going to get difficult and that he is not going to be able to help or fully mitigate the cost of living crisis. What do you make of what he had to say?
Well, Wednesday is an historic moment for the Chancellor, for him to show whether he really understands the challenges that people are facing at the moment, because as a constituency MP in Leeds West, I've got mums who are saying to me, I'm struggling to put food on the table, I'm now skipping meals so that I can feed my children properly. I've got pensioners saying to me, I'm not turning the heating on even though I need to, because I'm worried about how I'm going to pay the bills. And for those people and millions of others up and down the country, we need more than warm words from the Chancellor. We need the Chancellor to do the things that will relieve that pressure on the cost of living, like a windfall tax on the big profits being made by North Sea oil and gas companies and channel that back into lower prices for everybody else. And as for the increase in national insurance contributions, it's the wrong tax at the wrong time that's going to take even more money out of the purses and wallets of working people.
Well, let's talk about the planned rise to national insurance. We just heard the Chancellor defending it, effectively saying that he needs to sort out long-term funding for the NHS and social care, and that is specifically what that tax is designed to do. It feels like I'm in some kind of parallel universe where Labour is arguing against a tax rise for the NHS. What's going on?
Well, originally, you'll remember, Sophie, that the Chancellor and Prime Minister said that the national insurance contribution rise was to fix the social care problem. But we now know that there's going to be no new money for social care in this Parliament. Then they said it was to reduce NHS waiting times. But there's no credible plan to do that in this Parliament. And all the while, we know that the government are wasting billions of pounds of taxpayers' money. Just in the last few days, we've heard shocking stories that £8.7 billion overspent in PPE procurement, including PPE that couldn't even be used by the NHS, and now the government are burning it. Taxpayers' money literally going up in flames. So you can't help wondering whether this tax rise is to pay for a black hole because of this government's waste and mismanagement.
Well, either way, if there is a black hole in the NHS, doesn't it need to be filled for whatever the reason is?
In which case, why national insurance? Because the problem with national insurance is that it's a tax on work. It's a tax charged by those people who go out to work every day and those people who employ them. Some of the richest people in our country who earn an income through dealing in stocks and shares or through a portfolio of buy-to-let properties, they won't pay a penny more in tax with the national insurance rise. That's not right. It's not right that ordinary working people should be fitting the bill. And we are the only G7 economy that is increasing taxes
what
at
other
a moment
taxes would
when
you like
people need every penny.
What other taxes would you like to see increase then? Or do you think the tax burden is too high?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Sophie, I think that this is the wrong tax at the wrong time, and in the middle of a cost of living crisis, we shouldn't be increasing taxes. You know, the Chancellor keeps giving interviews and speeches saying that he's a low-tax Chancellor. We'll prove it on Wednesday. Reverse this national insurance contributions rise and cut VAT on domestic gas and electricity bills to help people with the cost of living crisis. Now, look, I know that Chancellors have to make difficult decisions. You've got to account for every penny of taxpayers' money spent. But if you are going to increase taxes, you should ask people with the broadest shoulders to make a bigger contribution. This Chancellor is not doing this with the national insurance increase rise, and that's why I say it's the wrong tax at the wrong time.
Do you think Rishi Sunak should cut fuel duty?
Sorry, I didn't hear that question, Sophie.
Should Rishi Sunak cut fuel duty?
If the Chancellor reduces fuel duty this week, we won't stand in his way, but even a 5p reduction in fuel duty will only reduce filling up the car with petrol by £2. So I don't think that really rises to the scale of the challenge that we face at the moment, which is why we're calling for a windfall tax on the big profits being made by North Sea oil and gas companies right now, and channel that in with both a reduction in VAT from 5% to 0 on gas and electricity bills, but also a big expansion in the warm homes discount, because we know it is families and pensioners on low and modest incomes who are struggling most at the moment with the rising prices. So that would be my priority. But any sensible measures to deal with the cost of living crisis, of course, Labour would support those on Wednesday.
I just want to talk a bit about the windfall tax, because this is something that Labour is talking about a lot. You clearly feel that there's public polling to back you up. But isn't there a real risk that this could discourage investment in the North Sea at a time when, frankly, we do need to focus on our own domestic energy supply because we're trying to cut ties with places like Russia and independence and our dependence on places like Russia for oil and gas?
Well, when Shell and BP announced their record profits earlier this year, at the same time they announced a big increase in the dividend payments and also share buyback schemes. They didn't announce big
future
new investment programs.
I'm talking about future investment.
But this is the point. But this is exactly the point, Sophie. With the big profits they're making at the moment, they're not channeling that into new investment. Instead, they are using that money to further push up their share prices. And we've also seen big bonuses for the executives at these companies. So it's not clear to me that these profits are being channeled into investment, but instead into further inflating the share price. When I first said that there should be a windfall tax back in January, we thought it would raise about £1.2 billion. Since then, oil and gas prices have increased substantially, and that surcharge, that windfall tax, would now bring in about £3.7 billion. And the Chancellor says that money somehow is untouchable, but the fact is Chancellors have to make choices about who to tax and who to spare. And instead of carrying on down the path that this Chancellor is going on, he should look again at Labour's proposals for a windfall tax and use that to keep bills low for everybody else. That would be my priority as a Chancellor. I'm deeply disappointed it doesn't seem to be this Chancellor's priority.
I just want to talk to you about a couple of things that the Prime Minister said yesterday at the Conservative Spring Conference. We played the clip of him speaking to Rishi Sunak earlier, but just to read you his words. He said, "The people of this country, like the people of Ukraine, choose freedom every time. I can give you a couple of famous recent examples. When the British people voted for Brexit in such large numbers, I don't believe it was because they were remotely hostile to foreigners. It's because they wanted to be free to do things differently and for this country to be able to run itself." Now, Rishi Sunak defended the Prime Minister. He said that he wasn't trying to make a comparison. It's not directly analogous, he said, and the Prime Minister wouldn't say that either. What's your take on what the Prime Minister said?
It is utterly distasteful and insulting to compare the fight for freedom and the aggression of the Russian state to the decision to leave the European Union. It is insulting to the Ukrainian people who are fighting for their very freedom and their very lives, and it's insulting to the British people as well. And if the Prime Minister didn't mean that analogy, he shouldn't have made it, and he should take back those words and apologise to the Ukrainian people and the British people for those crass remarks he made yesterday.
Rishi Sunak also made the point that the UK has been really supporting Ukraine and that President Zelensky has been very grateful for the support that the Prime Minister has given him. In the same speech, Boris Johnson said this about Labour. Do we want them in charge at this moment? Do we want them running up the white flag? Do you see them standing up to Putin's blackmail? What do you make of that?
Well, I'm not going to take any lessons from this Prime Minister about standing up to the Russians. This was a Prime Minister who, on the eve of the invasion of Ukraine, was whining and dining people with close links to Putin's regime. This is a Prime Minister who overruled the security service in giving a peerage to now Lord Lebedev of Siberia. So I'll take no lectures from this Prime Minister. He lacks the seriousness and gravity for the moment, and I would ask the Prime Minister to apologise for his words that are deeply insulting to the people of Ukraine and absolutely ridiculous about the Labour Party.
Rachel Reeves, thank you very much indeed for being on the programme this morning. That was Rachel Reeves ahead of next week's Spring Statement.